What's up guys, my name is Laura and this is my YouTube channel, obviously. And today I am making a video about my theory of what this fifth dimensional shift is, because I have heard a lot of people talking about this shift to the 5D, and I have just been really confused about this and just curious about what that really means. And I've been wanting to make a video about this for a few weeks now, but I've kind of been waiting a little bit to do some more research and really just try to figure it out and establish my beliefs enough to actually talk about it and make a video for you guys about it. So hopefully I have learned and thought about this enough to be able to articulate myself fairly well. And I'm also making this video because I don't really understand everything about it, and I'm hoping that maybe someone can bounce their ideas off of mine. So yeah, definitely comment your thoughts below. Tell me what you think the 5D shift really is, and let's start a conversation about it or something, you know? So yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into this. So I'm gonna start with an analogy here. Imagine that this whole board is the ocean and this magnet is a fish. Now, if this fish had never ventured to the surface of the water, it would not be able to perceive what water actually is. The only way that the fish could perceive what water is would be for it to extend its awareness beyond the water and see the water from an outside perspective. So this is kind of how I think about the dimensions. It's hard for us to perceive the higher dimensions because we are so immersed in the third dimension. Now, before I jump straight into the fifth dimension, I'm going to start off by explaining what the lower dimensions are. So imagine that this is the first dimension and this is a first dimensional creature. As you can see, it can only move right or left. It has no perception of what up and down are, and it has no perception of depth. It can only move on this linear axis of the first dimension. If we move this creature to the second dimension, it can now move up and down, side to side, and anywhere in between. Obviously, we are three-dimensional beings, but we can only perceive things in 2 dimensions. Now, to understand this, let's look at the 2-dimensional creature. So, if the 2-dimensional creature had eyes and was looking straight ahead, from its perspective, it would only see things in 1 dimension. Same thing for the 1-dimensional creature. All it would be able to see is 1 point on that line. So as you can see, the perception of the creature is always 1 dimension less than the reality that it exists in. Now, let's imagine us in the 3rd dimension. We can only see things in 2 dimensions, so think about it this way. We can move our eyes left to right and perceive width. We can move our eyes up and down and perceive length, but we cannot move our eyes forward and backwards to perceive depth. We can only perceive that depth exists because of the context clues in our environment that signal to us that depth exists. So, another example is my hand right here. I can move my hand sideways, up and down, but we only know that depth exists if I can move my hand forward and backward. We can see that my hand grows larger and smaller, or if I shift my hand from side to side, it changes shape. These are 2 clues that signal to us that depth exists. But what if time froze and there was no more movement? Then we would have no perception of the 3rd dimension, because we would only be looking at our environment from a still 2-dimensional snapshot. If time resumed, then I could continue to move it around and we could once again see that there is depth. So this brings me to the 4th dimension. What is the 4th dimension? People say that the 4th dimension is temporal because it is a measurement of this passage of time where things can move and we are able to perceive depth. So just as the 3rd dimension is a lens in which we can perceive 2 dimensions, the 4th dimension is a lens in which we can perceive 3 dimensions. So I'm going to try to draw this out for you guys. Imagine that each square is a 2-dimensional snapshot in space and time. So we can think of the duration of time, or the 4th dimension, as a straight line through space. So we can call each end of the spectrum the past and the future, or we can call it time and anti-time. Either way, this passage of time is the 4th dimension because, again, it allows for movement to occur in the universe, which is what makes us perceive the 3rd dimension. This is where a lot of people get confused, including myself sometimes, because people people would argue that why is the fourth dimension time? Doesn't time exist in every dimension? And to that, I would say yes, time exists in every dimension, but it's a little more complicated than that. This brings us to the concept of space-time in physics, which is a fusion of the 3 dimensions of space with the 1 dimension of time into a single 4-dimensional continuum. So it's kind of like with each higher dimension, we are just adding on another element to the one before that. That is what time is to the 3rd dimension. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how you get the 4th dimension. Now, if we are going along with the idea that each higher dimension is orthogonal to the one before it, or existing at right angles, then what does that say about the 5th dimension? This concept implies that the 5th dimension is in fact perpendicular to the 4th dimension, meaning that it exists outside of this linear timeline of the 4th dimension. Now, what does this mean? Well, if this is true, it means that the 5th dimension consists of an infinite amount of parallel timelines, which proves the existence of parallel universes or alternate realities. This is where we start to transcend the idea of time as being a one-dimensional line, and we start to picture it as an infinite 2-dimensional plane. Now, this can be very tricky for us to perceive from our 3rd-dimensional perspective, especially because we can only perceive things from one space and one timeline. This is where the discussion of free will comes into play, because if we did not have free will, then no parallel universes would exist. If we were somehow able to look into the future and see that this event was occurring and we did not want that to occur, then we would have no choice but to just live out our life until that event occurred. We wouldn't be able to do anything about it to change our future. We would be on this linear timeline with no deviation. But now let's return to this idea of free will. If we saw that something was going to happen in the future that we did not want to happen, then we could make a different decision that would lead us to a different timeline where this more desirable thing happens. Now, whether or not you know what's going to happen in the future or not, you're making these decisions all of the time. Now, let's say for instance, here's you, this is the present moment. Now, you've come to a crossroads in life and you can decide to either go to college and study business, or you can decide to skip college and go ahead and start your business. Whichever route that you choose, the other decision doesn't just disappear. It still exists and is being played out in a parallel universe, but we have no perception of it because we are living out the reality that we have chosen. So let's say we decided to go to college. We're on this route. Our focus is only existing here. This other alternate reality where this decision was made exists, but we cannot perceive it from the choice that we have made to go to this timeline. Now, this is where things start getting really obscure and kind of hard to imagine, because this doesn't just apply for the big decisions. This applies for every single decision, every single day. On this timeline, you decide to wear a red shirt. On this timeline, you decide to wear a blue shirt. Every single decision you make, there exists an alternate universe where that decision has played out. Now, obviously, we cannot perceive all of these realities at the same time because that would be too overwhelming for us. So the way the universe works right now is that we can only follow one path that we have decided to follow at a time. Now, since we make decisions all the time, every day anyway, we are in fact moving around on this timeline of infinite possibilities. Therefore, we already exist in the 5th dimension, just like we already exist in the 4th dimension. We are already within these higher dimensions, but we have no perception of what they are. So this leaves me with the question of what is the shift to the 5th dimension if we are already existing in the 5th dimension? The way that I've heard people talk about it implies that we are all just living on this 4th dimensional line, and there's only one other 5th dimensional timeline that exists, and if we can ascend, then we will shift to this 5th fifth dimension. So this is what trips me up, because I don't think that the fifth dimension is just one timeline above the fourth dimension, because that would make the fifth dimension the same as the fourth dimension. That is why I have come to believe that the fifth dimension is not a physical shift to a different dimension, but an expansion of awareness of that dimension. So let me try to explain this. So just for some context, let's say that most people exist here. All they know for sure are the things that have happened in the past, but they have no idea what happens in the future. They're just going along, and they believe that the events of the past are influencing their future. As Alan Watts talks about it, they are like the puppets of the past. They are living day by day, believing that they are a victim of their circumstances, and every past event is affecting the future path that unfolds. But if you expand your awareness beyond this limited belief, you could see that the future already exists. Now this is where we get into the people that believe that the future is already predestined. They believe that every day is playing out their fate, and there is no such thing as free will, or they believe that free will is an illusion. Now, if someone were to expand their awareness beyond that, and now they see that there is a fifth dimension, they see that they have free will, they see that there's all these alternate realities, they have now gained awareness that they are not predestined for this event down here to occur. Like my prior example, if they were able to somehow see into the future and see that this thing was going to occur and they didn't like that, they are easily able to see that all of these other possibilities throughout all of these other timelines exist, and if they wanted to avoid this future event, they could just shift their awareness to an alternative reality and make the decisions that will lead them to that alternative reality. They suddenly see that they are in control of their future, and there is no predestined outcome that they cannot escape. So for example, let's say that someone has grown up in a poor family and all they know is just money is a struggle. They're struggling to survive, to get food on their table, to pay rent, to take care of the kids, and they believe that they are going to be poor forever. That's their limiting mindset. That is the future they have determined for themselves, and they think that there's no way out and that's all there is. They are going through this singular timeline that is going to end up with what they believe, that they are going to live poor forever. But if they extended their awareness to the fifth dimension, they could see that there is this other reality that already exists right now. Even if you're living in this present moment and this is in the future, this already exists right now, because time and space are one thing. Space-time. You have to start to let go of your concept of time. All of these possibilities emerge if we can think them into existence. If we can imagine a reality where we are the richest person in our family, in our city, in our state, if we had everything we've ever wanted and money was never a struggle, then that already exists. In the present moment, we have already made a reality that that life exists, and as long as we keep our eyes looking up to that reality and focused on it, this is what happens. You start to drift up right where you wanted to go, to that reality. Likewise, if you wanted to experience this reality right here, let's say you want to go on vacation this summer, you don't think you're going to scrape up the money, but you're imagining this reality. The more you imagine it, the bigger it grows, and you fix your gaze towards this reality and you move towards this reality. You shift to this timeline. So I'm not implying that we only exist in the fifth dimension if we are aware of it, but I am implying that this shift to the fifth dimension makes it easier for us to perceive how much control we have over our lives. It makes it easier for us to see that our futures already exist just the way we want them to be, just by our observation of them. And physics is starting to prove that this exists. I don't know the name of this study exactly, but I know that there's been these studies where just the observations of these scientists change the structure of the particles, or something like that. I'm not a scientist, I don't have any degrees, whatever, but I know that there's been studies that prove that our observations and our vibrations that we send out change the structure of the matter or the air or whatever. It's the same as like the study with the water. Our observations that we cast onto the water and the intentions that we set and the emotions we feel change the molecular structure of the water. It's the same idea. Your awareness awareness of the fifth dimension and your awareness of all these parallel universes where anything you want to happen already exists in a parallel universe gives you the perspective of someone who is controlling their fate and choosing their future. So this shift to the fifth dimension, I guess, is just a term for this heightened awareness that we control our realities and we are controlling where we end up in this endless continuum of space-time. We are not destined to go here if we want to go there. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. That's what I think the fifth dimensional shift is. Not that we are physically shifting into a fifth dimension, but that people are becoming aware of the fifth dimension, thereby making their lives better and easier. So, if you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more of my fun theories about dimensions and the universe. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, different opinions, let me know in the comments, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Peace out.